Hello, and welcome to Grease Mountain. This is the fourth dev bog. This video is a slight admittance of failure. Usually I set myself a certain goal, and generally I think this is probably due to some kind of a weird, I don't know. Basically, I set myself the goal of, and I do this a lot. Like, not going to sleep until I achieve a certain thing. So my goals were to have sprint, walk, idle, and jump done before I go to sleep. But the problem is trying to learn a whole new, it's not necessarily a programming language, I guess, because it's just blueprints. But even so, for such an innocent arty-farty mind such as myself, it's quite hard to wrap my head around, and the way I've been going about it is looking up various different tutorials to do the different stuff, and it becomes a bit of a Frankenstein's monster of a thing. And there's, to a degree, there's referencing what exists within the resources of Unreal Engine 4 and the YouTube videos. But unfortunately I've just hit such an impasse with adding sprint that I've decided to just confront that weird self-imposed rule set of not going to sleep until I do all these things, and just calling it there. And I'm just going to share what I've done. So I will switch over to this, and so here is the main character. This is his idol, and I'm just going to focus on that. So I don't have a sprint, which is rather annoying, and that's definitely due to the fact that I don't fundamentally understand the blueprint kind of stuff. So I've created all these various animations. Sprint here is the only way you actually be able to see it. Obviously walk. There's mechanically there is a sprint, but I haven't been able to attach the actual animation to it quite yet. And also there is a jump. So and I went through a couple various versions of this. Initially I just had a static pose for the falling animation, but I came to understand that you can, because if you create a jump animation and just rip the falling animation of that jumping animation, the fact that it's continuously falling means that the looping animation won't work. So what you have to do is create a quite like a run cycle. You have to create a looping falling animation, which looks weird, when it's just, you know, static, but I think it came out pretty well. Yeah, so I like woke up pretty late because I was working last night, but I woke up about like 3 or 4, and it's now nearly 5:30. And I do feel slightly upset that I wasn't able to get the sprint, but I really did try. So, but you know, it's a start. The sprint mechanic is technically in. It just doesn't have, you know, the animation to convey, which is that one. And it's really fun with all the, if you can tell, but like the rig, you can get a lot out of the different elements. And I think as well, because originally for this video I was gonna kind of, because I've been recording my entire development of these mechanics, learning the blueprints, stuff like the camera controls that I did just take from the base character blueprint, but everything else pretty much I've done from scratch, because you know, I think it's good to not that I consider myself like a programmer by any means, but at the same time, I think when possible, especially now that, you know, this is out of education time, you can kind of take your time and try your best to just familiarize yourself with the tools that the program and the engine kind of provide. But even so, it's quite exciting, because the sprint is represented by the walk animation. It doesn't look right because the timing of it is he's just sliding around, but the walk itself feels fairly grounded, and the jump is quite high, but the transitions between them feel fairly smooth. I'm planning to add directional movement, so like instead of him just turning back towards the camera, there's going to be strafing and directional movement and stuff like that. But I think because, yeah, I was originally just going to react to an entire recording of my process, but I haven't compiled all of those recordings into a single sped up video. I think what I'll do is just open up Photoshop, close this, and go through a level idea that I've had, which is becoming a little bit more fleshed out because I've been thinking about things in more of a mechanical, from a more mechanical kind of perspective, and basing my ideas on what I wish to achieve. So stuff like the grapple mechanic with the hack jaw, or the chain jaw variant of the hack jaw, and stuff like that. And Yeah, because right now, the test scene is just the default third person level that they provide, which is fairly boring. And there's a few assets which I might just quickly make to make things feel a little bit more, bespoke and personal and everything. But here we go. So this is the first concept for the first kind of level. So let's pour myself a little bit of a drink here. Again, it's really tricky because these videos have probably become extremely bloated if I went into all of the ideas and all of the backstory and all of the contextual details of the aspects. So I'll try not to, but so this is the first kind of draft, and it's just something to drive some degree of level design, which some of it feels fairly redundant at this point because some of this level requires the grapple mechanic to be developed, and that's something which there's a fair amount of videos showing how to create basic movement mechanics in Unreal, but stuff like grappling and stuff is I'm a little bit wary, and that's where having people with actual knowledge of programming and stuff would probably come in really handy, which is why it's lucky that I'm on a game development course, I suppose. But so a tiny bit of narrative context. The character here, the guy that you saw, he's now clothed, but more or less resembles the same guy. He's got into some shenanigans with his gang, the Lagoons, and he's decided that he doesn't like what they've been doing anymore because what they've been doing is rather evil. So after a few little confrontations, they have cast him out into the kind of so there's a main city, Garth City, and surrounding that is the strange lands and the marshes of Mo, and out there is more like a wasteland, and where you kind of find yourself in the first level of the game is the meat heaps, which essentially is like a junkyard but for body parts and dead people and stuff like that. So a mixture of a mortuary and a junkyard kind of thing, but the way that body parts and synthetic biological augments in this universe are perceived, it is more like a junkyard for cars and old technology and stuff. So you wake up in a meat heap. So this area here, you'll be surrounded by corpses, and yeah, you'll emerge and it'll be rather disgusting. And you kind of figure out that you're awake and you're surrounded by rotting flesh and you're actually sick. So there's an illness kind of going around, which becomes more prevalent later in the game, which is caused by abuse of the use of biosynthetic augmentation and growth and stuff like that, and it's called the lech. And eventually, if you transmogrify to such a large degree, then your insides will expand and egress through any orifice, and you'll become hideous beasts and all that fun stuff. But so you've actually contracted this to kind of a lesser degree. So you're like, okay, and you're a little bit dazed because you've actually there's these other characters called screws. Actually, I might just quickly get a picture up of the screws. But what screws are people, because it's all kind of biological and stuff, that that doesn't limit that you can affect your brain in similar kind of like invasive ways. And so just scroll and where are you? See if I can find this. Where are you, my little screw? Have I scrolled past him? I think I've scrolled past him. Oh, here he is. So this is a screw. Actually, I might just quickly go into this. I haven't read this for a while. But screws. Ebenezer the Screw. I guess you probably can assume the reference, but dissociative punk roll capsule called psychological capsule. The DPRC, more commonly known as the dark perk, is part of the subcategory of capsules designed to cause mental illness in their recipients. When implanted, the individual will adopt additional punk rolls. So a punk roll is like stuff like I've alluded to in previous videos, like the lung runner, the transporter of biosynthetic parts, or an amputator, someone who removes biosynthetic parts. So those can all be defined as punk rolls. But capsules designed to cause mental illness in their recipients, and sometimes these gangs will employ screws to mess with the heads of their members, and sometimes even cause them to go into such a delirium that they will adopt different punk roles, because they'll actually get split personalities, because these screws have the ability to actually infect people's minds with stuff like dissociative personality disorder. But so the dark perk is a part of a subcategory of capsules designed to cause mental illness in their recipients. When implanted, the individual will adopt additional punk roles, unbeknownst to themselves. The DPRC, is used to manipulate biopunks into doing things they don't want to do, usually for biopunk gangs. Employing screws to covertly implant the target. The acts carried out by the additional roles will not be remembered by the individual unless they receive therapy to break the amnesic wall of their screw fixer. So that's like a whole other thing. But a screw fixer is essentially a counter to the effects of a screw. What we got here? Brain bludgeon. Okay, so it's really interesting looking back at this. So was a brain bludgeon. If the target of the screw proves to be a particularly hard nut to crack, they may resort to using a brain bludgeon. This crude glot weapon, when in contact with the recipient, will absorb slash degenerate the blood from their brain. The administrator. Okay, so this is the weapon you have here. The administrator is a biosynthetic part used by screws designed for implantation of psycaps at long range. It also has the capability to fire 4 different psycaps simultaneously, causing a cocktail of madness. So when Kenny the Lung, the main character, decided not to work for his gang, the Lagoons, anymore, they used a screw on him, and they started to get him to do more and more diabolical tasks, including working for child factories, which steal children and use their bodies to grow biosynthetic parts to just sell on to people. And one day he kind of starts to come to, for whatever reason. I think maybe, if I can remember correctly, someone starts to kind of let him know. And the tricky thing is, throughout the kind of story, is that as you progress back to get revenge on your gang, more and more of the things that you've done, which you didn't even remember doing, you were told. And so it's kind of a story about finding out that you're the villain, really. And whatever conviction you began your quest with becomes dwarfed by guilt. But yeah, that's so you wake up from the meat heap and you realize you've contracted the lech, but fortunately in this universe, it's quite easy to rid yourself of certain physical ailments. So you kind of progress down, and this is the first kind of hub area, and you come across this little thing, and this is like the spawn system of the game, an animation vat. So what you need to do is put a bit of your DNA in and it will take a tiny piece of your brain, and it will use some kind of fractal technology to by taking a sample of your brain, it will expand it, and then the actual biological aspect of your being will also be replicated and duplicated and cloned. But the thing is, in this game, you don't get to respawn for free. So I've always thought this about spawning is like they're generally fairly available, but I think it would be cool, especially within this kind of game universe, to contextualize it and gamify it by making it so you actually have to, because it's an actual machine that needs maintenance and power and resources, it's kind of like a secondary thing that you have to kind of keep in the back of your head. Like if if I want to maintain this spawn point, then I have to keep it going. So that's where this thing comes in. A photosynthetic generator, and I'm thinking of like coming up with more colloquial nicknames for these things because they are quite a mouthful. But you come here and it'll say something like requires agrofoam, or maybe there's a character here which will tell you that it requires agrofoam. So once the photosynthetic generator receives enough agrofoam, then it's able to, these kind of little vesicles, these little bulbs, will start to grow out of the top part of this kind of biomechanism and absorb the light. So in this universe, there is a kind of combination of the way that plants work and the way that human biology works. So the agrofoam works as just like here's an agrofoam charger anyway, and it's full of this kind of growth hormone, supercharged growth hormone. But then to power a lot of these biological machines, you actually have these more kind of plant-based systems which take light and power them. So you're dying, you have the ledge, and because you haven't been able to deposit your brain, most importantly a piece of your brain, into one of these things, if you die, you're dead. So yeah, you need to get this thing online, and additionally, once you get this thing online, it will also power a melting bin. So a melting bin is something that you go into if you're particularly ill, and it will kill you, melt you down, destroy you, whatever, and you will then in a fairly disgusting fashion come out of this orifice and fall into this little kind of coffin like pit, and come back to life like a newborn baby. So that's the kind of first area, and there's a couple of things alluding to later on. So there's a grapple sack, which this is kind of like on a higher, this is attached to like a little mound which you can't reach, and down here again there's a pit of more just decrepit, putrid body parts as a part of this kind of junkyard of body parts, and on the other side is the same thing, just on here, a grapple sack, but I don't think that necessarily has to be explained to the player right now. So onward and upward, you need agrofoam charges. So been used to using Unreal for a little bit, forgot the controls. Go here, and there'll be something here alluding to the fact that this is the gate to Meatmonger's mortuary. It needs power to open. So down there will be the owner of this whole place, which, by the way, your gang is kind of paid a decent sum to, make sure no one really knows you've been left here in the heaps of corpses, and you've just been left to be churned up along with the rest of them. But so you can't go through there. So you carry on, and you come across this little guy, And this is just a representation of all the different corpses that are left around here. And a cobble, really, cobble is a name for a type of kind of little street urchin type creature, which goes around usually after a skirmish between, different gangs and stuff like that, and starts to take the remains, whether that's biosynthetic parts that haven't quietly necrotized, or in this case sucking the scarce amount of agrofoam directly from his body into this strange kind of familiar creature, which has been designed to house the agrofoam which has been absorbed. But you can kill him if you like. So the idea is you go into the scene, and it's the first thing you can really interact with, and you do wake up with the with, if I go back here, with these weapons attached. So you could end his life. So if you do, it would presumably be in the attempt to acquire an agrofoam charger, but he doesn't have any. But he does drop a key or some kind of hippy dippy scientific-y blueprint, biological equivalent. But if you don't kill him, then he will be like, "Oh, hello, would you please remove the bottlings from my shed? I will provide you with the things you seek," or something of that nature, if you give him the time of day. So, so generally you would want to, the level would still work, if you don't kill him, do kill him, but it's probably better that you don't. So you're kind of given a little mission. He asks you to remove the bottlings from his shed. So he gives you a key, and also, if you leave him alive, then because his main role is to just kind of harvest the agrofoam from the corpses, he will then, as a favor to you, take some of what he's harvested and maintain the photosynthetic generator to keep your spawn point intact. Not necessarily sure if that would be alluded to the player, but so either way, from this area, there might be some more enemies as well. This is just very basic, but so either way, you get the key, and you can't go this way because it only opens from this side. So you have to go over here. You open the gate, and now you're in Cobble's little dwelling, because he's kind of like the Igor, the lowly janitor of the meat heaps that belong to the fleshmonger. So you come here, and then you approach the bottlings surrounding his shed. And a little bit of backstory on the bottlings is that within this world, a lot of the buildings are biologically grown, because everything is, and even further bit of context, which I definitely won't go too far into, but so this world, it used to contend with a mechanical component. So there was a war with an AI called Quinten, and it used to be that there was a lot of robots, but then a lot of the robots went mad and became things called street eaters and started battery farming people. And then there was this guy called Modular Mo, and he kind of rose up, and he owned this whole seamless synthetics industry, and he kind of had to progress through his underground labs because he woke up long after the events of the wars with Quinten and humanity, but he fortunately won. But then, as a kind of byproduct of that war, there was a stigma with the use of, mechanical technology. So everything became biological. So even buildings are made of flesh and skin. And a byproduct of things like buildings being made of flesh and skin is that these buildings shed. So it's called a shed, but it also sheds. So there's a kind of business formed around these buildings, where people would breed these things called botlings, these little flying creatures. They have sacs which protrude from their backs, and they're kind of like air sacs, and they blow out air and they kind of float around by kind of that. So they're almost like external lungs, which heave and wheeze and propel them through the air. And so this was kind of like a business which maintained the physical realities of living in skin-based buildings. So they would generally have breeders and hives, and the breeders would take them around and they would eat all the skin. But in the more poor areas, the botlings weren't fed correctly and weren't bred correctly, and so what happened is that when these people would take the botlings to these buildings, which by the way would have noggins within, which are people who kind of became computers. They submitted their brains to be, especially in the kind of lesser sense that they, how like houses have like a Siri or like a, so like essentially these people would embed their minds within a building to run them. So essentially these buildings would be alive, because they would have a brain integrated within them. But then the botlings, because they weren't treated correctly, would start to lay eggs in the buildings. And so it's almost like these buildings with minds integrated in them would have botling eggs. And so they would get infested, and this is what happened. This happened to Cobble's house, because he's a lowly little cobble. So this is the option. So if you destroy the bottling infestation, this is the option. If you've killed Cobble and just taken his key off his corpse, you just end up with a bunch of Agrafim charges, and good for you, whatever. But if you don't loot his house, but somewhat rid the infestation. There's a whole thing later, but yeah, if you don't rid the infestation, then you return to Cobble. He'll give you Agrafim Charger. He will provide extra resources for the maintenance of the Photosynthetic Generator, so that your spawn point, the animation vat, is kept up and running. And I've had a little bit of debate about this personally, because the spodes are actually tied into wait, do I even have so the spodes are tied into henges. Where are the henges? Where are the henges? Come on, you henge. So this was only like a little idea that you'd be provided with a spode. Where are the henges? Okay. So the reason why I'm kind of slightly hesitant to allow, so the idea was that if you do it, you'll get a personal attack spode, which is this thing. You'll receive this, and it will follow you around, and it will attack things that are a threat. But Cobble isn't a henge, so I think I might save that, and it might be quite hard to read, but again, it's going to be interesting to read this back because I haven't read it back in so long. But henges is a spode. Henges, damn, this is quite vague. Henges are an advanced something spode form. Damn, yeah, this is really, that evolved in the spodal dwellings. Might be too bad. Expedited by the scourge of the infestoid. So yeah, the infestoid are like an infected version of spode. They burrow deeper in the old labs. Damn. Might be too hard to read. There's a few spodes that didn't. Okay, yeah. Anyway, so essentially the henges are the farmers of spodes, and they're the only ones that can really wrangle them. So yeah, that was just, the picture was too low quality. But let's just say you end up with a spode, and that I think that's probably like could be a spode form as well. So you receive the Agrafim Charger, possibly a personal attack spode. He's able to keep your animation vat and photosynthetic generator running. You go back, you stick the the photosynthetic generator with that goes online. Then you jump into the melting bin. The acid within melts you down, and you emerge a brand spanking new Kenny the Long. And also this powers the gate, so you're able to open it, because that's apparently what it needed. So you then progress up here, acquire more Agrafim charges, start to come across more bottlings, and then you come across a bottling hive, and you realize that there was a little kind of nook / cranny which the bottlings were actually coming through. And I was also thinking, as kind of like an optional thing, if you don't destroy the hive, so if you don't destroy these like kind of actual bits of hive, then he'll come with you to the next area. But if you leave the bottling hive alone, then he won't. But yeah, I don't. It's an interesting prospect to employ kind of like moral choice within the game. I really haven't like made my mind up with whether or not to pursue that kind of aspect of game. Because like some of my favorite games definitely do it in such a way where it doesn't feel like at the forefront, like, you know, stuff like Bioshock. It's funny too because this game idea is called Biosynth, but you know, Bioshock, it gave you choices, but it didn't necessarily make it the forefront of the game. And I think that's I think that's kind of like a good way to go, because it adds flavor, but it doesn't necessarily, it doesn't overstay its welcome, and I think that's cool. And it's something that you just like notice kind of after the fact later down the line. And something like that, like I can imagine like killing the actual hive or not would seem like a fairly, you know, inconsequential aspect of the first level. But then if someone later on was like, oh yeah, the reason why Cobble didn't come with you to the next area to maintain your next animation vat is because you destroyed the hive, which was plaguing his dwelling. I feel like that could be like just a really cool instance of like forethought in terms of the way someone plays the game. I don't know, but either way, that was a little thought. So you progress, and then you get to meet Munger's mortuary. You have to kill him to acquire the change your gen cells. This is kind of just all these is like little placeholder designs. I think Meat Monger could deal with a couple more tools to cut people down and stuff, but I don't know. I just took it from my sketchbook. So fight him, not much thought as to how you have to kill him. Considering this is like the first like boss enemy, it wouldn't be too hard. And then again, just with these guys, a couple little guys, extra enemies. So you kill him, and then maybe you'll find in his little stash the gen cells, and gen cells are the kind of information you need to acquire to then grow new biosynthetic parts. So you get that, and you progress, and then it's almost like a tutorial thing. You find a gen cell inocule, which inoculates oneself with the gen cells. So you do that, and then now you have the ability to use the grapple hook mechanic of the hackjaw. And just in front of you is a grapple sack. So a grapple sack is a biological growth on a part of the level which you can grapple onto with the hackjaw. So you kind of like, you grapple onto that, and then you can kind of jump down, and then you end up back into here with your newfound weapon. And then hopefully you remember that down here there was the putrid pit and another grapple sack. So use it again to get over here, and then you have the option to go to like the next area, which would be to go further to enact your revenge and meet Fishnut, which is like the next kind of area. So, but anyway, but you can kind of go back around. So if you go through Meat Canyon and fight the rest of Meatmonger's men, you progress through here, open this, and maybe if you haven't actually killed the bottling hive, then Cobble will be compelled to follow you to the next area to maintain the photosynthetic generator with agrofoam, and thus maintain your spawn point. But yeah, that's kind of it. It's not still open. Yeah, I think once I finally use blueprints to get the sprint mechanic up and working, because there's really no, it's just a matter of time. Like, I'm willing to, just keep on being stupid until I'm not. Yeah. That's the only thing that's in my way. It's just keep on looking for the information and patience and stuff like that. And then I'm gonna start to do a block out of this level within Unreal, and probably before I undertake the grapple mechanic, I'll probably just work on enemy AI and a fairly basic combat system, and then later on make it so you can use the hackjaw to actually remove specific body parts from enemies and use those against them with the angular gun. But I'm sure there's some really great tutorials out there to show how to get the ball rolling with combat. But yeah, that's the fucking thing. Stay tuned. I feel, yeah. Bye-bye.